Seems to work too.
Oh.
I'm happy to use both.
Like steer?
Yeah.
Get rid of this one.
Okay. Should I start up?
Yes.
Okay. We're recording, or is this a webinar? Because I want to know if I can link to people afterwards.
We're recording, not broadcasting.
Not broadcasting.
I don't know where with Wirecast is not working.
Okay. But you'll send me the link to
Just
send this to somebody. Excellent. Okay, everybody? Hear me okay? Yeah. So, I'm going to present you. I didn't know how long these sessions were going to be. This is something we can probably talk about for a while, so I'm going to try to talk for about 10 to 15 minutes and then kind of leave it open for questions. So this is a bit of an unusual thing for me to talk about because this is the first time I've actually talked about this project. My name is Dr. Abey Campbell, but normally I go as Abey, and you'll see Abey in lots of the slides, so if I don't tell you that now, you'll get very, very confused. Most projects I'm doing, I'm a UCD researcher, so University College Dublin, and I research into virtual reality, augmented reality, and I finished up a couple of years ago a postdoc in sensors. So in general, that's the field I've been in, and this project that I'm going to talk about today is a side project. But it's a very, very important side project to me, and it'll go into where I'm planning to be in 5 years' time. So, we're hoping, going to be the world's first cinematic, immersive, dark comedy feature. So when I say feature, we're trying to do over 30 minutes. The reason that's important is we're hoping Sundance and a few of the other music theaters are actually going to have competitions for these sort of films, and they've got to be at least 30 minutes, so that's what we're sort of aiming for this to be. And we haven't seen anything else like it. We've seen a few things in Sundance that was last year that was kind of similar idea, but they were all short 5-minute experiences. And what we want to do is actually replicate a 40-minute experience that's not quite a play, but not quite a film. And I have found myself in a very odd position of being the executive director. I didn't know if this was going to happen when I saw this play last year and went, that would be great for a project. What if I got the writer with a whole bunch of other people I knew, and then I left and they go and make a film? Turned out that needs a bit more leadership, so I've sort of taken on that role to achieve that. So, first up in my talk, I'm going to talk about why the hell a computer science lecturer is actually making film. This is not my area. I don't necessarily know a lot about film, a lot about acting, but what I found is a lot of the skill set that I've developed over making augmented reality applications. The first AR app, I love these markers. Where's my marker gone? Ah! We've lost our R2 marker? I said I needed one as a prop. That's okay. I made my first augmented reality app in 2004. I managed to get published in Switzerland in the Computer Animation and Software Agents conference. And essentially what that did, if you saw that little agent that we saw there, what my app did was it used a current multi-agent system at that time to actually allow you to interact. So the agent would be perceiving the world and interacting with you. The problem at the time was AR was very slow, it didn't do very much, and it really didn't have that killer app nature to it. That today when we see apps like IKEA's sort of furniture app that you can go, actually, that's something. And I'm building up, and that's my sort of skill set, I want to build these sort of augmented applications. I'm going to give you a 5-year plan today, but my actual 40-year end career plan is I want to be able to hand somebody a pair of augmented reality glasses with their primary, secondary, and university education there in their native language, solar powered done, and hopefully do that for enough, for a couple of €100 that they can be thrown away and everybody on the planet gets educated. I was one of the I helped start Camara, which they've now taught over 1 million people IT skills in Africa, and I'm very proud. I was part of the first 14 volunteers that went to Africa, and I saw an amazing amount of people who were interested in IT but didn't have the resources there. Now, if you have any recycled computers, please send them on to Camara. They're an amazing service. They've now, Cormac Lynch, who founded them, is now actually in America founding the American branch, and which will become important in a few talk. I'll be seeing him again in about 2 weeks, and you'll find out why in a second. So, why am I doing this? Because this is very different to that. I'm also going to address that it is actually kind of VR what we're doing. When we talk about cinematic VR experiences, most people in the back of their heads kind of go, it's not really virtual reality, it's really just film. But I'll explain it's a little bit different to that and why it's important to explore these sort of technologies. And then I'm going to explain why the hell I've chosen a dark comedy and why I've decided that we need theatre actors to do this. Okay? So this is an idea that I kind of perceived when I first sort of saw this as a medium, and it's something that I originally saw more in a VR Connect, so recording people acting using Connects, and eventually I think that's the way we'll go. But it's the same skill set that we need. Then talk about how far along we are. We actually have one of my co-conspirators, Campbell, here. So you'll see a few pictures of her and me on the set. And essentially what our plan is to go forward from here on this project. So, just give you an idea of the team, because I'll be saying names and you probably will forget some of them. But myself is acting, Abey is acting as the executive director. We've got a theatre director who's also done a bit of film, Jenna Debris, who we've managed to grab as the director. We have a writer, Neil Sharpson, whose most background is actually more comics. He's also done some plays as well he's written. We have director of photography now, who's either going to be me or Stephen giving this talk, and Stephen can't be here today, and he's heading up Panocam. So if you have a project that you think you want to film in this sort of 360 panoramic immersive cinematic, he's the guy to go to. I promised I'd plug him. Camille has made proof that I did do that. And then for our lighting and sound, we've been heavily dependent on Camille and Neil Riley, because essentially when I looked at this first, like, lighting's not that important. Then we did a few tests and went, lighting is really quite important. And we have our actors here, Patty Jo, Clodagh and Caroline, who are doing a fantastic job taking all this on board. So why the hell am I doing this? Why am I not just worried about making a VR app and finding a bit of funding, which I am doing that on the side? This for me is low-hanging fruit. Back in 2009, I actually was part of what we think was Ireland's first augmented reality startup. We unfortunately did not choose Android. It was not my call. We chose to develop it on an N90 Nokia. That was a mistake on so many levels. But we got it working. We had an extra gaming app. We published it in a couple of conferences. We were very happy with it. It allowed you to walk on. It was markerless. You could actually just take a picture. We normally were using around the Liberties, so we're using the Guinness Storehouse as our target case for tourism. You'd walk up to the Liberties, you'd see the Guinness, you'd take a photo. We got it down to nearly half a second that you would get an image back. And if you were over 18, so the app was personalised, it would send you to the nearest pub with a voucher to get a pint. If you were under 18, it would send you to, obviously, the Storehouse Museum. So, very simple application. We were trying to show what could be done. But unfortunately, by the time we'd gotten everything working, we went out, we actually sent people to E3 and all these different sort of things to go, look, we've made an engine that can do this. And everybody was like, no, we're not interested in funding it. I then found out later that we'd actually paid for like 20 meetings with major distributors, which is the first thing you have to rule if you're a startup. If you're paying to meet people, you've made a horrible mistake. Because that money could have paid for me to go to E3, and I'm still bitter about that. But from this, I learned very much that you need to have killer applications for this. You need to have something that people respond to, that they go, yeah, I want to do that. Okay? And that for me is that I don't feel augmented reality. It's perfect what Jackery are doing. I'm really impressed by it because they're choosing a very good sector to go into, but others aren't doing that. So what we need is a better killer app. And in my 5 years, so hopefully by the end of my career, I'm handing these magic glasses over, they do everything, it's brilliant. But in the next 5 years, I'm working with UCD to teach, to have a kind of a joint computer science course that we're teaching with Beijing University of Technology in Beijing. I have a 5-year contract because the government doesn't really believe in giving us permanent jobs at the moment. But I've got 5 years in which to do that, and I want by the end of those 5 years to be sending virtual Abey to China and not real Abey, because there's no reason that I have to go over. And the reason I want to do this is VR Abey is needed because real Abey wants to stay at home in Ireland with my very kind and beautiful wife. Technically that will be true in 2 weeks' time, hence Cormac Lynch is flying back over to here to go to my wedding. But I want to be here. China is amazing. It's an amazing experience, amazing culture experience to go. But I'm there for about 15 weeks a year and it's a little too long. It's amazing people, incredible experience. But yes, every 2 days I have to wear that mask to go to work. Just to put that in perspective, when you have either sandstorms and when you have some of the pollution, it really is that bad at sometimes. Also, culturally, it has the funnest ads I've ever seen. And yes, the Decepticons actually sponsor our paper, which is a very odd thing in work and that sort of thing. But why this sort of immersive stuff? Is it really viral? Well, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a photosphere that we're generating a 3D object and we're mapping this across. So there's a lot of computer science skills that actually are very important to bring to projects like this. And I've always been a fan of image-based rendering. If anybody is old enough to remember Wing Commander, Wing Commander was images. It was just rotations of those images were what you were actually seeing and then interpolating between the two. So this is also from Berlin University. Should really have the link on this. The one on the right is actually an interpolated image allowing you to see things from different angles. Because when we start thinking in 3D and we start setting, like, how can we actually get really high quality virtual reality, we should start looking again, I think, at image-based rendering, because as was pointed out today, these guys don't have a lot of power. They really don't. The GPUs are interesting, they're getting there, but they don't have a lot of power. So you've got to look at different image techniques to actually get a lot of this stuff done. So that's why I have no problem doing this immersive cinematic experience, calling it VR, and going forward with it. So why did I choose sort of a dark comedy? The simple thing is, people remember things better when they're not a little bit horrified, a little bit thrilled. And I really feel this is a play I saw that a friend of mine wrote. And normally you go to your friend's play and go, okay, I'll have to like it, and I'll sit there, and we'll be okay. I literally, after, it was about an hour and 20 minutes, was just shaking by the end of it. It is a fantastic play. It really gets into your psyche and really kind of projects to you kind of thinking, well, how far would I go if somebody had hurt a friend of mine and done something awful to them? So I'm going to try to play this now. We're going to see if this works. This worked when we tested it earlier.
Do you know what we're going to do after it's done? We're going to go out in the town, you and me, get pissed. I'll go down to the bride room and dance and we'll dance and we'll dance until they kick us out. And after he's dead, I'm going to dance and smile every day. And we'll go down to the beach, you and me. We'll just lie there, watching the sunrise. Just lie there, watching a beautiful new day rising up. I miss her.
So, that just gives you a bit of a taster there anyway. I have a little bit of a demo of some of the test footage we shot, and one or two ones there just to get you an idea. But one of the main things I wanted to do with this was actually get theatre actors. Because the problem is, if you're scanning everything, so you're putting a camera in a room and it's recording everything around you, even if one actor is the primary actor speaking, somebody could just spend their entire time looking at the other person. There's no reason. You're not in control of the camera anymore. So everything has to be done in one set, one take. So it's a very different sort of thing. But if you're a theatre actor, well, life's always like that. It's not a strange thing to be in. And one of these things in Sundance, Oculus have now made their story studio. They're targeting film actors and these film directors and everything, and I think it's just a completely wrong idea. You want to actually target somebody who's just willing to actually keep acting continually. But in doing that, we're actually having to train the actors a few different things. Because if we have a camera here, and they're talking to somebody there, and they decide to stand in front of the camera, we effectively have blocking. We have another thing that we have to train the actors to remember, that they are effectively the cameraman at the same time. Because if they're speaking or moving, people will look at them. So if I've got two characters here talking, the camera's there, that's maybe a 100-degree angle. So it's quite comfortable. Let's say you get about 110 degrees in the standard sort of Gear VR, and then if you modify a Google Cardboard, you get something similar. But they're standing here, the actor's over this other side. We're now forcing the person watching this to decide where they're looking. Okay? It also adds, because this is a bit of a dark comedy and there is horror aspects, so you get to do all those sort of classic things that the sort of villain or antagonist comes from a certain direction every time. So you're used to these two people talking, and then suddenly somebody comes up behind you or walks through you. So there's all these different things you can sort of do. So far, Campbell have been helping us with the filming. So we've unfortunately have to bring quite a big desktop computer. It's normally using an NVIDIA 970. So we're doing all of this stitching. So when you get those 6 cameras and you stitch them together, we're using essentially the graphics card to aid all of that. We have our full cast there outside our set. Last Sunday we saw the first 12 minutes of the film. So what we're aiming to do is we're going to do one more shoot and we'll have like a 14-minute bit of, it's kind of nearly a semi-short film within the main film that we'll be able to release. We've had to start thinking about audio and how we're going to actually record this audio, how it's going to be done, whether we're sort of using directional mics or we're clip mics, all these sort of problems that you don't really have to worry about too much. When a camera goes like this, you can just put everything behind. But obviously, we have to shoot everything. So these things actually end up having to get hidden on set. As you can see here, that's literally being hid behind a coat. So the idea is, can you actually make these sets so the user isn't looking and going, I see a wire. So it's a very different thing, especially lighting it is an absolute nightmare. So this is the current scene that we've got. We've kind of chosen the camera setup there. And we also have to figure out where that's going to be comfortably. Because unfortunately, if you're sort of bent down here, a character is walking around, you are going to feel very small compared to all these different actors. So you have to choose exactly where you're doing, and it's a whole new skill set for both the director and the actors to learn. And this is quite interesting that my experience comes from a virtual world where we've always had to worry about cameras and placement. So actually a lot of those skills transfer over. So for instance, if anybody's used the Oculus Rift to play Skyrim and some of the first-person games, you'll notice you're 6 foot tall. Everybody's actually 5 foot because it's an empowerment fantasy, it's an RPG, but you wouldn't even notice that. It's sort of subliminally being told to you from your position of that camera. So again, we have all those sort of virtual reality skill sets that I've developed over the years doing research into virtual reality that hopefully I'm able to bring on set. And a lot of testing. We've had kind of 2 test days before we did everything. And footage from this one we actually have today, a sort of a demo to show you what it's like. And one thing that we're trying to do also is, compared to, if people have seen sort of the videos online, we're trying to up the bandwidth. We're trying to get as high quality as we can. Unfortunately, and I'm hoping there's a couple of Googlers in the audience, currently YouTube won't allow us to put it up because it's too big. It's more the resolution. We're pretty much going 4,000 by 2,000, and any of the nice panoramic YouTube inputs really is not liking our footage, so we're looking for help on that one. And also between sets, so once we do a recording of something, we then actually have to go render it, get that take. We wouldn't even do the full take because the full take process might take an hour, but we normally render, let's say, 20-30 seconds just to get a lighting check. And then this is me showing that to the director, so Jetta can actually then figure out, okay, is that sufficient to actually go forward with it? So it's a whole different skill set to start learning. The other thing you start realizing is the sets become important in a way that in a film, even a theatre set, it's very different, because you literally could spend, if you've got a newspaper article close enough to the camera, somebody could spend the entire 10 minutes just reading that, not looking at your actors, not looking at anything else. So obviously our story is set in a period of mourning, so somebody has passed away, so obviously we have to have your cards, your remorse cards and everything, and having a picture of the person that they wouldn't see. So kind of filling that set with an actual story in a way that you wouldn't normally do. And just from a practical point of view, you end up having 6 GoPro cameras, you end up having 12 batteries, because what you've got to do is keep them alive. So you could fill them up very, very well. Batteries will only last maybe 2 hours doing the proper footage, so you need to swap them in and out. We also found ourselves actually filling the GoPros to their end with different takes and so forth. So we ended up having a lot of data transfer issues, and you'll end up with like 10 or 20 gigs on a whole bunch of 6 things. That's 120 gigs. So USB 3 becomes a very slow thing to you at that point. So there's these technical challenges to overcome, and it's something that, especially, I believe Google has a sort of camera rig for this. I'd be very interested to see how they address those sort of issues as well. And again, one of the things we can do, we can use Google Cardboard to view it. I've got a Gear VR, which I find really is probably the best mobile display at the moment. And that really helps just the clarity. And because the accelerometers are very, very good in the Galaxy Note, you really get a really smooth response, which is very important because we're thinking of getting people to stay in this world for 40 minutes. That is a long time. As it is at the moment, we'll have kind of plans that you'll get essentially a scene break every 15 minutes or so, and hope people are willing to be so engaged in the story that they'll keep going. But it is a technical challenge that we have to keep looking at. And it's one of those things that we just haven't seen people try these longer experiences. Now the hardware, we're using a 360 Hero. So this is just the mounting on this. You can actually 3D print some of these ones, but we just literally bought off the shelf. These aren't mine. This is Panacam's that they're using to help us. We're also using sort of the standard recommended software the Autopan Video Pro. We find that it's quite good, especially the GPU acceleration really helps. It's a little expensive. I think it's a couple of €100 at least. But there is a lot of software being developed there as well as open source. We haven't played with them yet. Very much we're kind of dependent on Panacam for a lot of this stuff. And we also found that this stuff works. So we're not really looking at it as a research project just yet. If I was doing this as a UCD project, I'd be trying loads of different ones and getting things. Here's like, no, I just need this to actually work tomorrow. So it's a lot different. The Ghostbusters quote of "the real world actually expects results" is something that I always get reminded of. Now we do have a bit of a size issue here. This is a data thing that is, so it's 3,840 by 1920. We're running at about 1 gig for 5 minutes. So essentially we need 28 megabits per second for streaming. So that's a lot. So if this is going to be streamed, that is quite difficult. There is platforms out there. Milk VR for Samsung does this, but what they do is they essentially lower that. Their videos are about a quarter of the size of what we're putting out. But I think in the long term, we feel, and especially myself after my experience doing augmented reality for a long time, unless you have something that really does act as a killer app, really show this off, what happens is people put a little bit of content out there. It's okay. At first people go, oh, that's amazing. It's like, yeah, but are you going to keep using it? And it just fades away, and then we wait for another resurgence. Now, I think the Oculus, especially for the gaming aspect, I think will keep it going. But I think things like this will need really high quality video, really, really good headsets like the Gear VR, and hopefully, if the cardboard keeps going, that with the newer smartphones, the response time is sufficient under that sort of 20 milliseconds for a rotation that people don't feel unwell while they do it. So audio-wise, we're still, that's I think next weekend's worry, or I think it's a weekend and a half. I'm kind of leaving the audio guys to deal with that. It's great being executive producer sometimes. You're like, they know what they're doing, they're professionals, I really don't know what I'm doing, so I can leave them at that. But again, once we start doing things, and if we start getting really high quality audio and positional audio, that's really going to start adding up as well. But at the end of the day, we're thinking about a 40-minute film is going to be about 8 gigs. We are going to examine different ways of compressing it, but we really don't want artifacts in this. And we also really have to look at the stitching and how we actually achieve that. So, where are we going to go from here? Our aim is to essentially have a teaser, which is going to be a bit more than a teaser. I'm a big believer in the Doom shareware model, where you give essentially a third of the whole thing away for free. And it's the only way to really get out there to show somebody an experience. So we basically shot the first third of the film. We're now going to do one of the middle scenes that is quite dramatic because it's a point of view experience. You get to be a guy getting tortured. In other words, you're probably going to get to look at me being tortured. So I'll have a camera rig, you'll look down, you'll see me shaking, scared, and so forth. But it'll sort of project what you can do in the storytelling you can do with this that's very, very different. Now, hopefully, my goal in all this and all the projects I get involved in is they're slowly bringing up both my skill set and everybody else's skill set to a point where we can start doing using this as a teaching tool. But that's the sort of long term. So what we're hoping to do is once we get everything together and we feel it's professional enough, we're going to aim to do a Kickstarter and essentially promise people we'll look and try to get cheap cardboards so if they buy the film, they'll not only be able to download it but actually see it on something. We're even going to brand them, Joanna. We've been looking into that. We're going to, of course, approach Oculus Storyboard because they're looking for films like this, they claim, so we're going to approach them. We also want to look at YouTube as obviously a delivery platform, Milk, and then, of course, we're going to look at the normal sort of Arts Council funding. But we're completely open for ideas, comments about what we're doing. If we're completely crazy, that's good to know now. So, yeah, any questions, welcome. That's me. That was a bit longer, but that's the first time I actually talked on those slides. So. Okay, back on the left.
What's the current source of funding?
Me, frankly. Everybody's been pretty good, and everybody's basically getting expenses. We've obviously, for like the core creative team, where I've agreed with them, kind of a share model type thing. So if this actually went huge, they do well out of it. But mostly everybody is basically using this as a training exercise, and we're trying to pay like basic expenses. We have like an upper limit of what I can do for that, and the hope is then that we use Kickstarter funding to shoot the whole thing, because I only have so much spare cash to actually go the whole thing. But yeah.
So you mentioned that at the moment microphones are hiding set, right? Are you not afraid? Because I presume that the camera is the audio listener, or it should be anyway.
Yeah, it is. That would have been my very naive approach at first. I very much was like, cameras have microphones, it's positional. But the difference in quality that you would get...
No, see, like I'm coming from the media background, so by
all
so
the
difference between the camera microphone and the cover microphone. But the question I have, right, is, see, the audio is going to be coming in where the user is, right, so that's where your eyes are. And now we're having audio coming in from a few different places, so how are you going to place this back into...
That's very important. When we place them, we know where we place them, and what we're going to have to do is figure out then a certain amount of positional playback that's going to have to be done. So that's why originally we were kind of going with the what are they called? The clip mics, because that would have helped a little bit with that. But we're hoping we can go back and sort of redo this, and we'll be looking into the audio later. We've tried to record audio from multiple locations, so we actually do have the ability to go back into that and re-edit the raw and try to figure out what to do. But it's going to be a challenge. Now, admittedly, especially with the teaser footage, it'll be as good as we can do it. And then when we're actually shooting the full thing, we're hoping to take all the lessons from this and get really good sort of positional, and then we're going to have to start re-examining it. So, for instance, we got, 4? No, that's it.
The other thing on the audio is the binaural audio.
Yeah.
Is what everyone's talking about. So that technology has been around for a long time, but I have a friend who has microphones from like 15 years ago that clip onto the actors' ears. So we might look at using solutions like that. But binaural is the next wave of research we'll be doing with audio.
I consider to take a picture of surroundings, not the actual video, and shoot actors on a green screen and put them as video in a scene. So you can benefit from lower bandwidth, basically from everything, except you have to be precise on the light.
That is one of the more advanced things, and Hanacam as a company is looking into that a little bit. The main thing with that at the moment is the actors are interacting a lot with the scene. They're sitting down, things are bending, but eventually, definitely with the ceilings, if we got it the right way, we'll just take that image of the ceiling that never changes, and what we'll look at is some of the compression algorithms. We'll just go, that never changes, here's one copy, and everything else is the same. So if you have a good compression algorithm that actually was smart, it would be better using that than sort of a green screen scenario. Because if things don't change, then we're hoping you could identify that. Which that is more challenging than the whole MPEG-4 will solve all this problem. Is still not perfect there, but it's getting there. Yeah.
Is there? It sounds really cool. The first you mentioned it first person. Perspective. Is there much of that? Do you find like that it's? Would it kind of be jarring for people to go from kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of floating camera to all of a sudden actually being there?
Yeah, we're deliberately using that only once in this whole 40 minutes. So the idea is for 40 minutes, The majority of it, you are essentially sitting with the actors, because most of this, the play itself was designed to be a very minimal set. That's why I thought this was brilliant as conversion. And the whole point is to jar you into a POV for a very limited amount in a sort of monologue environment where one of the actors who's an assassin is literally talking to you directly. It is actually the fun thing, and I tend not to mention this too much, especially being recorded, but this is already happening in pornography. I mean, the immersive films are huge, but they're designed for short 5 minutes for whatever reason. I have no idea. And they
with the porn industry leading what
that's the one problem, though, is unless there's other content. I mean, yes, they'll lead the way in a small market, but unless there's other content, and Storyboard is looking at the children market, they've got this lovely hedgehog as their little mascot, but then where's the in-between? Where is something that you can actually go to Sundance, go to these music things, get real people interested and show the power of this narrative medium? Something's going to happen there, and that's what we're doing.
The other thing I was going to ask really quick, sorry, just I'm seeing the other thing is that you know, both for the thematic reasons and basically when you have an FPS perspective, it doesn't move. I mean, other than the fact that you're sitting there.
Yeah, all of our camera work is going to be fixed on this, because if you want to expect somebody to spend 40 minutes, and this is coming from the computer science hat and the HCI hat on, I've been messing with virtual reality headsets now for over 10 years. I get sick on them. My record now is 3.5 hours on a DK2. Half-Life 2 is amazing when you have hands. But that's my record of that. Most people, if they're anyway sent, and you will have, I've probably put on over 500 people in virtual environments. My favorite being George Hook. That man is huge. He is a very tall man, and he is very frightened of heights. So he shaped so badly, but such a professional. He was able to tell the audience what he was doing was on radio perfectly. So we will not be moving that camera at all, because you just couldn't, not for what we're trying to do. But we're learning.
In traditional filmmaking, framing camera is very, very important, and also then within the framing, the positioning of characters when they're looking in different directions, space left on either side of them, etc. And you were talking about it a bit earlier in terms of positioning and the degree of vision of the participant who's viewing it. Theatre actors that are going to have a much better time with the continuity of ongoing acting rather than stop-start type capture. However, they still, unless it's immersive theatre, have a fourth wall type thing going on presentation-wise. Have you noticed any kind of conventions forming in terms of, I suppose, sort of safe zones, heights that you work with? What have you noticed
so we've learned a certain amount of don't really go really close to the camera. So the camera has become a kind of a natural boundary. And that boundary you have to put a chair in, you have to do something physically in the world to give them that boundary, because you can't just draw a line down, because you can arguably digitally remove some of these artifacts later on, but in general we're trying to do this without doing that. We are essentially teaching the actors that you are the cameraman. And that's the analogy that we're trying to give them. And that's worked out reasonably well. We've had a few takes where, they looked at the camera and they were like, why did I look at the camera? Why would I? And that sort of thing. That they kind of beginning to learn that, no, this is somebody sitting right there. You two are talking. You're used to them looking at each other. It would feel weird if they looked at you. But for dramatic effect, it scares the bejesus out of you when if you spend 10 minutes with these guys happily talking, they look straight at you. Because you're just, okay, I'm in this, especially on that sort of thing. But we are building with conventions as we go, and we hope that this will only be the first one, that there's so many members of the team that are interested in doing this, and hopefully we'll have a few more after.
Is it all fixed positioning, or is there any movement in the camera?
No, we're fixing it. But that's my choice based on the fact that this is, we think we're going to try for kind of the more torture scenes to have it back and forth. Now, nobody's being untortured, it's implied. Trust me, when I run the Kickstarter on this, people are going to think, God knows what. If they give us money, we don't really care. Cool, so that looks like we've done anyway. Last one before I give out my three.
If you're showing it in Sundance, would everyone have to have their own headset?
that would be a problem, which I don't know how they're going to handle, because there is different sort of film competitions. So we'll enter. We don't even know if we'll get into like the first stage. Maybe also if we did. But yeah, they will be looking at things like Gear VR. Like Gear VR now, there's about 50,000 of those sold. And then obviously, if cardboard sort of takes off, there's going to be a lot more. But yeah, individually, they're going to have to actually have some sort of. So if we're doing a Kickstarter, part of our Kickstarter is going to have to be finding very cheap Google Cardboard to give out with. So there's no point in you giving us. Well, technically, you could hold your phone at a distance and do that.
Could you do dome protection?
You could do dome protection. Actually, yeah, that would. Yeah,
you know, because you get a stack of people in the dome.
Yeah,
like very cool. Social experience too.
We have. So I'd say theatres might take that on board.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that theatres might take on board. But in general, we give you one of these. But the only advantage is the Kickstarters get one of these, and you can look at other things afterwards. So just keep spreading that sort of VR evangelism.
Thank you.
So on that one, it's me done. Yeah, one more as I'm walking down. One. He was cheeky, you got it. Hey guys, that's me done.
Hello. Hello.